Yes, hi again. Good morning. It's me, Emily Kachian, and today I'm going to introduce new course of the lectures. And today we'll start to talk about again some strategy stuff. And today, first lecture in the new year would be about good and bad bishops. And the very first position I would like you to share, it's a very famous position from the game Karpov Alotia back to 1992. My personal opinion, Anatoly Karpov, former world champion, was one of the best positional players ever in chess history. And he has a great talent. And this game introduced how to play in situations when you are having good bishop and opponent has, let's say, um, bad bishop. So one of the general principles, I think I mentioned that before in my previous lectures. It's very simple. So the bad piece, the bad bishop or bad piece, supposed to have a teammate. As more teammates on the board, as less you feel problem of your bishop. As less pieces involved, that means your piece is going to stay pretty much lonely, then you will feel a problem with your bishop. So in this game, Karpov introduced that one of the principles. So what he's doing here, very first move, so he's found the principle of trading the rest of the pieces. Even if that cost him a pawn, but it doesn't really matter because what he's following, again, he wants to keep the bishop on a8 alone. I mean, just a lonely bishop on a8 will be definitely a bad piece. Rook d1. So that's the first stage. We can say pretty much complete. White trade two rooks by force. Now, black's getting some activity. And it looks like the activity is supposed to compensate the position on a8 for the bishop. But in fact, still, black facing big trouble here. So in the game after queen d2, white went here b3, and then b4. So White's plan is pretty much simple. They would like to do c5 to nail bishop on a8 because bishop on a8 will defend the c6 pawn, and then simply try to improve the position. And they also don't mind to trade the queens. So after b4, black went here queen a1 check, and they went back on a6. In fact, in some comments after the game, Anatoly Karpov mentioned the best chance for black was here not to play queen a6. The best chance for black was here to play actually queen a3. Right here, the idea of playing queen a3 to control c5 squared to kind of prevent c5. Lothier saw that up. I mean, I assume he saw that, but I assume he also got scared of line, let's say c5, bc, b5. This kind of stuff, because looks like it's still some trouble, some problem for black to deal because it's c6 pawn. But what he missed, it's a queen c3 move. That move will give some pressure on b4 pawn, on c5 pawn, and on e5 pawn because e5 pawn connect with check. And that move was very strong. I assume that's the move kind of maybe missed from black point of view. And let's say if white will take, and then play b5, then black has a chance to still survive by playing, let's say, g6, and on bc to play b5. It sounds like white's still better here because the c6 pawn more advanced than b5 pawn. But like I said, it's a little bit complicated, and it could be chance for black to survive here still. Still survive. That's why I assume, like I said, black could miss that line in their calculation, and they decided to play safe, and they went after king h2. They went queen h6. I mean, it's understandable. What they saw, it's a problem, a backward problem. and they decide to control back rank by placing the queen on c8 and guarding d8 square. But it was very passive. That's another lesson. When you do have a bad piece, obviously you try to improve your bad piece. If you, let's say, don't have a chance to improve your bad piece, then at least always try to keep aggressive way to defend your position. Because remember this, if you decide to stay passive, you will lose at the end anyway. So that's the problem, that's the mistake which has been made by black here. They went queen d8, they went queen d2, they took a pawn, they thought they were, at least, normal position here, but they forgot about, they haven't solved the problem, the issue of the bishop on a8, because the bad bishop on a8 still remained bad. So after queen h6, queen d4, again, there is no rush, and Karpov not playing here b5. So he was to simply keep pressure. This is very important moment, by the way. Let's say he could try to play here b5, and after queen c8, take on c6, which is still okay for white. But again, that could give black some chance to survive, because now, as you see, queen and bishop, they pretty much tied to defend c6 pawn, and then a pawn will simply distract by pushing. And I don't think so black has any, let's say, problem here in general to save the game. So that's the reason why Karpov is not hurry. Karpov tried simply to improve his position. So queen d4, and that's a typical c5. Not even bothering himself by playing b5, c5. Well, one of the old rules saying how to play against the bishop when bishop remained at the board alone. We always saying keep your pawn on the opposite color of your own bishop, because then your own bishop would be more flexible and he will have more space. So that's exactly the law, how Karpov following it. So again, I'm not saying this is 100% law and you're supposed to do that every single time, but trust me, that's the pretty much situation when you're dealing, let's say, 99% or 90%. So c5 here. After c5, black decided to go bc. Well, if they do, let's say, b5, it's not going to really help too much, because still after queen d6, we have a permanent problem, c6 pawn. It's still pretty much very tight, and the bishop on a8 has absolutely no hope to get back to the game. So Lothier decided to take on c5, queen c5. Well, obviously, again, not bc, since a pawn will be passer. So queen c5. As you see, guys, white's queen absolutely dominating, and the bishop on a8 still stuck on a8, and black has still some issues with back rank, and it all forced black to do a move g6 to kind of make a window for the king. h4, another pawn goes and stands on the dark squares, and also white trying to gain some space on the king side. Again, it's almost necessary to play h5 at this point, because white could decide also to attack on the king side at some point. That's why black's still trying to guard g4 square and stop g2 g4 move. Almost necessary to do queen b7 and trade the queens. In fact, if you don't trade the queens, sometimes white in the situation having following maneuver from h2 to g4, from g3 to f4, from f4 to g5, and threatening something like king f6. So it's remind me of one of the interesting games, I think Nigel Short played stuff like that, when he went actually from h2 to h6 by his king. So this is very typical, and like I said, black almost forced to go and play queen b7 and trade the queens. But that's no situation when you have an extra material and you have to trade the pieces. At this point, like I said, every trade, since the first move, every trade give black less chance to survive. Just remember this rule. If you have a bad piece, you must have pieces on the board, not off the board. Because one of the principles I remember when I was a kid, one of the lessons which I learned back to time when I was in the academy in Moscow, it was very simple. If you saw the bad piece from your opponent camp, simply trade the pieces, leave that piece alone. So king f4, king f8. Now slightly improve it again, just in case, to put a bishop on e4 and pointing on g6 pawn. As you see, guys, black bishop absolutely tight, and it's really hard to do something because, let's say, I'm originally supposed to think about to play c5. To play c5, you must move the king on e7 to b6, right? But it's almost impossible because we have a problem with king side, especially f6 square and f7 pawn. That's why, again, black king absolutely tight, and he has to defend the king side, and bishop himself just doing nothing on the queen side. So, and now white simply prepare destruction on the king side. They create the passer on the king side. Again, if you do hg, then after fg followed by h5, it's simple win. So black need to stay just like that. After g4, they decided to do bishop a8, as I mentioned, but still after gh, f4, bishop b7, and here black decides to resign. Again, decide to resign, and there is no way to defend this position, and h pawn will go pretty much straight forward. The bishop on e8 still remain behind the bar, and a simple win.